What's going on, everybody? Good afternoon or early evening for some of you. And John Schneider has spoken publicly. John Schneider has said some things. John Schneider had his annual combine press conference with the media, and he said some things that are interesting, and we're going to talk about them. It's not quite it's not quite the level of last year because last year during the combine we had two picks in the top 20, including one in the top five, and we also had four in the top 55. So the combine had a little more gas for the Seahawks because we had all those premium picks. And it's not quite as juicy as 2 years ago because the Seahawks had traded Russell Wilson right before the combine. So there was a lot to talk about then that was really interesting. Right now, not so much. There's still some stuff going on that is, of course, intriguing, but most of the really interesting things have already been said because Schneider has spoken to the media a few times recently because of the Carroll firing and McDonald hiring. So he didn't have a ton to add this year, but let's go over some of the things he did say. And he did say some stuff that people are going to have an interest in hearing. So I feel no need to bury the lead here, so let's just lead off with the big thing that he discussed, Geno Smith. Because obviously, despite the recent restructuring of Geno Smith's contract, there are many people who are very insistent on seeing things through a lens of this is all a prelude to a Geno Smith trade, which I have said before, I think the odds of that at this point are like 2%. I think it's very unlikely, but I will acknowledge that the team has, with their public statements, left the door open. And while the financial commitment would be straining, it is not completely it is not a complete non-starter. So I can understand why people are still buzzing about it, if for no other reason than that we have nothing else to discuss right now. Like, what are you going to do? Sit there and talk about whether or not there's going to be another season of Between Two Belores next season, or are you going to talk about who the Seahawks starting quarterback is going to be? I understand it's more interesting. But John Schneider did have a couple things to say about Geno Smith. And the first thing he said really didn't do anything to settle the question, right? John Schneider said, I have this tweet from a Dugar on the screen, but many people passed this quote along. John Schneider says he sees Geno Smith as the Seahawks starting QB, says he's the starter until he's not. And a statement that is that much of a non statement is going to allow people to see things in the way that they want to see them. And sure enough, people most certainly have. So this is obviously kind of a nothing statement, right? It's literal. It's a tautology, right? He's the starter until he's not the starter. That's like saying there's no such thing as a round square, or a thing cannot exist and not exist at the same time. So there's really not much to go on there. It's like a Rorschach blot test, and you look at that statement and you read into it what you will. I do think that there is something to be said for the idea of the Seahawks leaving their options open, but in my opinion, to actually exercise the option of not having Geno be your starter, you're going to need to be blown away by a trade offer, and I just don't think that trade offer is coming. So I think this statement kind of does show that the current belief is that Geno Smith will be the starting quarterback. And while this statement might be a little bit of a mystery, Schneider went off podium not too long after and said some things that are far more clear and, in my opinion, are a pretty definitive backing of Geno Smith in 2024. Maybe the first statement wasn't, but this was. Condotta passes this along. Asked about the timing of the restructure of Geno Smith's contract last week, Schneider said other people made a bigger deal out of that than we did in the building. Schneider said it's never been a question of whether Smith is going to be with Seahawks in 2024. He was going to be here. It was a matter of like, when are we going to tell him we are doing this with his roster bonus? So that seems fairly definitive. So anybody out there who's been asking for the Seahawks to be more definitive in their stance on Geno, that's about the clearest thing we've seen yet. Schneider said it's never been a question of whether Smith is going to be with Seahawks in 2024. He was going to be here. So to me, at this point, the only way you can seriously discuss a Geno Smith trade is if you're assuming that Schneider is just lying, which, I mean, people lie. Anybody can lie. Anybody can just say one thing and do the other thing. We've done it before. But if you're looking for him to at least say something definitive on Geno Smith, I think that's the best you're going to get. And I feel like that's pretty definitive. I want to say it again. Never been a question of whether Smith is going to be with Seahawks in 2024. He was going to be here. So, looks like we have our answer. And I mean, I don't think there's any other way to do it. To me, actions speak louder than words. And the actions that this team was taking were louder than the words that they had to say concerning Geno Smith and even Drew Lock. Now, he did actually talk a little bit about Drew Lock as well, and I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about these other things that Schneider went over. Schneider noted that Drew Lock is a free agent, said what he said of all the free agents. They will meet with them soon and get that process started, but he said team considers him in their future plans. We've got a cool group of guys that we want to get all of them back. I can't help but think about, I remember after the 2021 season, before the offseason started, the media met with Carroll. I think it was a press conference, and Carroll was asked, well, what are you looking to do this offseason? And Carroll basically listed off, we want to bring all of our free agents back. We want to bring back Dwayne Brown. We want to bring back Brandon Shell. We want to bring back DJ Reed. And none of those guys came back. Like, we brought a couple guys back, but there were plenty of guys that he mentioned in that press conference saying, like, oh, we want to bring this guy back, and that guy back, and that guy back, and that guy back. And they didn't bring him back. And it didn't look like they even tried to bring him back. It looked like just something that you say. It's something that you say because you like the guy. It's something that you say because there's no need to say anything otherwise. And that's what this kind of feels like to me. I don't think we're going to be able to bring Drew Lock back. He's going to be more expensive than the typical backup. And with all the dead money we're about to have and all the money we're going to need to spend to address needs on this team, I just don't think we can do it. I could be wrong about what Drew Lock's going to want, but I think Drew Lock's going to want more than typical backup money. And given how he looked last year, I don't really think that's the right move. I don't. But he did address Drew Lock a little bit, and I do know that some people have noted that Schneider and McDonald have both spoken relatively positively about Lock this offseason, but I'm not convinced that means we're going to move heaven and earth to bring him back. He also kind of commented about how he and McDonald have been vague about players during this offseason, like, for instance, Geno Smith. That's a great example, but there have been a couple others as well. John Boyle has this quote to pass along. I'll go ahead and zoom in on the exact quote. But basically what he's saying is that, we just got a new coaching staff in here. We don't know what these guys think about these players because they haven't been in the building. He knew what Pete thought of these players because Pete's been in the building forever. Pete was responsible for bringing most of the guys in. So he's basically just talking about how Mike has a vision of where we want to take this thing, but you've got to get into the specifics of the positions too. And basically he's just trying to explain why things have been so vague from the Seahawks camp. Basically, we just got all these brand new coaches. We don't necessarily know exactly what all of them think about the whole team. So I think that's pretty understandable, but he does seem to be addressing the fact that the Seahawks have been occasionally frustratingly vague with their plans. But really, do we want anything else? Like, do we want this team to just advertise what they're planning on doing this offseason? I don't think so. I know it would be nice for us, but it would also be nice for every other team in the league. So I think the kind of mealy-mouthed language this team has utilized concerning some of the players on this team is just something we're going to have to live with for the time being. And it makes sense, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean it reflects how they ultimately end up feeling about the player going into the actual season. A couple other things from this press conference. John Schneider was asked about Jamal Adams. Is he in Mike McDonald's plans in 2024? Is he in his plans? Yeah, I mean, we'll find out. We'll keep working through things. We're still trying to figure all that out. So that's a little word salady. There's not much to say there. Greg Bell passes that quote along, which I don't think does anything for us really, but very, very hard for me to imagine that Jamal Adams is on Seattle when the season starts. In fact, I'm kind of wondering what's taking them so long to move off of him. These teams, we're seeing these teams across the NFL starting to make moves. So, and we've already made a move. We already restructured Geno. So, I'm expecting something to happen here in the near future. But I find it very hard to believe that Jamal Adams fits into Mike Macdonald's plans. Macdonald's defense calls for versatile safeties. I don't even know if Adams can do anything well anymore, much less everything. And in this defense, being able to do everything is very, very beneficial, very, very important. And we also got a comment from him about Abraham Lucas. He was asked about the knee surgery, and Schneider did say yes, Abe Lucas has had knee surgery this offseason. And when they asked him, is that going to take care of the problem? He said, hopefully yes. So interpret that how you will, I guess. Like, hopefully doesn't sound great, but the point is the goal of the knee surgery was to take care of this issue. So I think we have to sit here and look at a statement like that and say there's optimism. There's reason to believe. There is a logical path that results in Abe Lucas going on to have a full career after this because this surgery dealt with the issue. But it's certainly not set in stone. Hopefully is not going to inspire a ton of confidence in people, and it probably shouldn't. All right, so that's really about it. Again, he didn't say anything shocking. He didn't say anything hugely illuminating. Again, the big meat of this press conference was him finally giving something of a confident statement concerning Geno Smith. And I don't think it's killed the speculation. It probably should, realistically, because I don't think that dream trade offer is coming. But it probably should. All right, see you guys later. Streaming on Twitch later. Go Hawks.